proportion. And then next week I would like to do faces, all right? And I'll get more into that before I leave. So for this page, we're going to work with half of it for right now. See if I can do this standing up. So just kind of eyeball where you think the middle is, and you're just going to draw a line dividing that page in half. So I would recommend, we're going to just work on the left side here. I would recommend that the lines that you are drawing be really light, because some of this stuff you're going to erase and you don't really want to see it later. I'm probably going to have to go darker just so it shows up on the screen. Okay, so don't do what I'm doing, I guess, but try to go a little lighter with those lines that you're putting in there. I would go with our first line here because we're going to try to figure out the proper proportions. And actually all the stuff that we're doing right now, when I get commissions to do portraits for people or do paintings of people, this is how I start. Now usually they're not a straight on view, we're going to do the easiest view, right? But I'll use a lot of these measurements to help, and I'll use these basic shapes that we're going to use on here to figure out their proportions before I start doing any kind of details with them, all right? So towards the top here, we're just going to make a little dash. You can see I left a little bit of space from the binder there. And then from that mark, we're going to go down with a straight line, and then leave a little space at the bottom like we did at the top. You're going to make another little dash from there. So once we have that line, what we're going to do is between the top and the bottom, we want to divide this line in half. So we want to find about where we think the middle is. Make a little mark. And I'll show you this because it might come in handy as we're going through this. Instead of me grabbing a ruler all the time, sometimes when I want to make some measurements, what I'll do is I'll take the point of my pencil and put it on the end of what I'm measuring, and then I'll take my thumb. So if I was measuring up here, and I'll take my thumb and I just kind of put my thumbnail where the end of that measurement's at, and I'll use, that as a reference basically to see if I'm getting pretty close to what I'm doing. So it looks like I'm a little bit off on the one I'm doing here. Let me double check. Yeah, so I'm off just a little. That's not too bad. But some of these other spaces that we're going to do, this is not a bad tool. It's just a little quicker than grabbing a ruler and trying to figure it out. You can kind of gauge it from there. So I've divided my line in half, and now I have two sections. And I'm going to take those two sections and I'm going to divide them into half. So a line in each one. And once I've divided those in half, I have 4 spaces now. I'm going to take each one of those spaces and divide it in half. We're doing way too much math for art day. So now we should have 8 spaces in here. All right. And when you're drawing the human body, the average adult is about 7.5, 8 heads tall. All right. I thought 8 would be better than going with the half mark, just trying to get you guys figured out. When you're talking about you guys in junior high, depending on 5th through 8th grade, you're looking at 5.5, 6 heads tall. All right. As you kind of go from there, and this is how I would set up to make sure the body's in proper proportion. That way their legs are not too short or too long, their upper torso's not too short or too long. I would section it off like this. So in this first space, you're going to go with an oval for the head. And then to figure out how wide the shoulders are, if they're facing straight at you, it's basically the human head turned to the side. So this middle line, so whatever the measurement of my head is, when I turn it to the side, my shoulders are going to come out about that long. Okay. So I'm looking at about there and there, and I'm just going to make a couple little marks. Now right under the head we are going to put the neck in the second space here, and the neck takes up about a third of that space, and so I'm just kind of drawing a little square shape. And since you guys don't have to do this part, I'm going to extend my lines out here for my spaces so that you can see where those are at, because sometimes they get covered up when we start drawing, and I want you to be able to see the different areas here. Right. You can keep them small, but that way you can see where they kind of divide up. So we're going to put the shoulders in, and I'm just going to basically go with a line from the bottom of the neck there, and then the bottom of our upper torso here. It's almost 2 heads tall. It's going to go to this fourth mark here, and you can see I'm kind of bending it down because it gets a little narrower as it goes down towards the waist. The bottom of this is about where your belly button's at. And then right under that, we have kind of a midsection that's a little bit below the belly button, but that's where our legs are going to connect to. And it is a head tall, so I just kind of make kind of a rounded shape in there. It's not wider than the shoulders. You don't want to get any wider than that. That looks like a little marshmallow down there. And then from this shape, we're going to start to attach the legs. Our legs are actually half of our body, or they should be. All right. And so from here, the shape that I'm going to use, that's going to be the upper thigh that is going to connect to the knee. It's kind of an oval shape, but it's a little larger at the top, and it gets a little smaller. And then if it's 2 heads tall, that second line for the head there, that's where the knee is going to go. And I don't always necessarily draw where the knee is at, but it's nice to know, especially if they're not standing straight up, if they're running or something like that. Maybe they have their leg bent a little bit, kind of see where that is at. So just a little bit larger, connecting to the midsection there, and then bring it down. It should taper off just a little bit, get a little smaller. And then from where the knee is at, we're going to do the lower leg. And it starts the same size as where it ended here, but it is going to get a little smaller as well. And right before you get to the bottom, you'll have where the heel is at. And usually in that space there, I will have where the heel's at, and then I will do kind of a triangle shape for the foot. So stays about the same size, gets a little smaller as it works its way down. You have the ankle, and then just a basic triangle shape for the foot. Not that people stand with their feet out like that, but this is not bad for what we're drawing today. then we'll go back up to the shoulders to make the arms. And from the shoulder to the elbow is almost two heads tall. So it's kind of the same shape as the thigh, just a little smaller. So it'll go 2 heads, or about where that the torso ended, where the belly button line is at there, and that'll be where the elbow is at. And so then from the elbow to the wrist is 1 head tall. So that'll get it a little narrower as well. And then you've got the wrist, and then I usually just put kind of a square shape, a rectangle shape, where the hand is going to go. So 1 head tall, you get the wrist. Well, we might have drawn the Martin Worthy ones earlier. But. So now I use these measurements a lot if most portrait work, they're facing forward on you, but sometimes they might have their arms bent, or if they have their hand up. I still want to use those measurements. So like if this one had the arm going up, I still know that this is 1 head tall, so from the elbow up, I know that it's going to come in here, and maybe the hand goes up in that direction, or maybe the leg is bent, and I have to go 2 heads for that outward. So that's where that measurement of, if I do a quick measurement with the head, and then I can measure outward, I can get a bend. So if they're running, I showed some classes this the other day, if it's to the side, everything is still the same as far as the measurement. It's still going to be 2 heads down at the knee, 2 heads out this way, and then, if the arms are up. The only time it would be different is if they're running at you. So then if their leg is up and they're running, this shape right here is no longer 2 heads tall. You don't want to make that 2 heads tall, because it will look like it's going straight down, and they'll look even longer than before. But if their leg is bent, this is still 2 heads from the knee down. Or if they're pointing at you, this whole part of the arm is shorter, because you're not seeing it hanging down from the body. So that's the only time those proportions would change on you. All right. So what I would like to do for the remainder of class in this section, I'd like you to pencil out another character just like this. All right. And when I do these, and I'll show you this too, because this seems to be a common mistake as well. You still want to start with your line. This line doesn't matter how long or short it is, as long as you still get those 8 heads tall in there. It could be a person that's down the hall that's still an adult, but down the hall they're this big, and when they get up closer to you, they're a lot bigger. This line just dictates that you're going to have to section everything off properly. So here's what I see a lot of students do. They'll make a mark, and then they'll start just making marks all over the place. And they'll get 8 spots, but one spot will be really small, one spot will be really big, and then all of a sudden their proportions are all over the place, and they wonder why their legs are more than half their body, or their little bitty legs and this big old body. Once you get that sectioned off, let me find mine here. Then I want you to start to add some details to them. All right. Too bad my smart wasn't here. So you'll start erasing some of the lines, but basically when I start to create whatever the person is I'm drawing, I have these shapes like this, and then I'll go in and I'll start going, okay, well the neck, and then, they've got short sleeves, and it kind of goes around the body, depending on the fitting of the clothes. You have to start thinking about how you wear stuff. Well, this shirt is not going to go real skinny tight in here. This shirt's going to come off and come down into where the waist is at. Okay, well, if this is the belly button and my shirt hangs down a little bit more, then it's going to go past my belly button into here. And so you have to kind of think about those things. And then you go in, you just start erasing some of those lines. I'm not worried about the face or the head or any of that stuff right now. All right. I'm more worried about seeing a nice shape person, and then you redoing that, but then trying to make them into whatever person you want to. All right. You can add whatever clothes, jeans, a dress, a shirt, button up, t-shirt, hoodie, whatever you want, shorts. You can do any of those things, but I'd like you to try to practice with that on that side. And then I'll be around to help you out without any questions. Okay? Questions right now? Anybody quick? Nothing? Just make sure you get those measurements right. Get those 8 heads in there, and then just start doing what you're doing. I printed out a kind of a cheat sheet, and it's got basically what I've talked about, and then it has somebody that's looking off to the side a little bit, so I've got one for each one of you to keep with you, and you can look at it. So I'll pass those around while you're working. Okay?